They say Savannah is one of the most beautiful cities in America, but beauty can hide a lot of secrets. Beneath the Spanish moss, the cobblestone streets, and the historic homes lies a city that never truly sleeps because the dead never left. From unmarked graves under hotels to ghostly children playing in the streets after midnight, Savannah has earned its reputation as one of the most haunted cities in the world. Tonight, we're walking straight into the shadows. Welcome to Screamville. This is Savannah After Dark. Welcome to the 1790 Inn in Savannah, where the building is so old it's basically held together by ghosts and vibes. It's actually a few historic homes stitched together, some dating back to the late 1700s, which means the walls have survived wars, fires, bad fashion, and way too many secrets. If these walls could talk, they'd probably ask you to leave. The star of this place is a spirit known as Anna, and she's the reason room 204 stays booked and feared. The legend says Anna was a young woman in the early 1800s who fell in love with a sailor instead of the man she was supposed to marry. When things went sideways, she either fell or was pushed from a third-floor window, and apparently she never checked out. Guests staying in room 204 report clothes and jewelry being moved around like someone's reorganizing your suitcase without asking. People feel taps on the shoulder, gentle nudges, and bed covers getting pulled back while they're trying to sleep. Not aggressive, just very much present. Like, hey, I'm still here, don't ignore me. And Anna isn't alone. There's also a little boy named Thaddeus who's said to wander the inn. Guests and staff have reported finding shiny pennies left behind in random places, like someone's trying to let you know they passed through. Cute. Until you realize no kids are staying there. Downstairs in the kitchen and dining area, things get louder. Staff have reported hearing the sound of metal bracelets clinking, followed by objects flying, pots, pans, utensils, like the ghost said, and another thing. Some employees refuse to work alone after dark. The creepiest part? None of it feels angry. Guests say the activity feels almost routine, like the spirits are just continuing their day. Stuff gets moved, covers get pulled, pennies appear. It's not about scaring you. It's about reminding you that you're sleeping in their house now. All right, settle in, because Bonaventure Cemetery is one of those places where history, heartbreak, and absolutely not energy all coexist under Spanish moss. Bonaventure didn't start out as a cemetery, nope. In the early 1800s, it was a luxury plantation owned by a man named John Mulrine. And when I say luxury, I mean Southern aristocracy, tea on the porch, dramatic sighing, and probably judging your shoes kind of luxury. The estate was called Bonaventure, which literally means good fortune, a bold name considering how many people ended up permanently moving in later. By the mid-1800s, the land was sold, parceled up, and eventually turned into what Savannah does best. A beautiful place soaked in death, drama, and unresolved emotions. In 1846, Bonaventure officially became a public cemetery, and Savannah said, "Let's make dying aesthetic." And they did. Oh, they really did. This isn't your regular cemetery with crooked headstones and sad vibes. Bonaventure looks like a haunted movie set that got a landscaping budget. Massive oak trees drip with Spanish moss like nature itself is sighing dramatically. Statues stare at you like they know your secrets. Angels look sad, children look eerie, and the river nearby adds that soft, you shouldn't be here ambiance. Now, let's talk about the residents, because Bonaventure is packed with Savannah legends. One of the most famous graves belongs to Johnny Mercer, the songwriter who gave us classics like Moon River, which is fitting because if any ghost would hum softly at night while floating around emotionally, it would absolutely be a songwriter. But the real star of Bonaventure, the Beyoncé of cemetery ghosts, is Gracie Watson. Gracie was a little girl born in the late 1800s, the daughter of a hotel owner. She died at just 6 years old from pneumonia, and her parents were devastated. They had a life-sized marble statue carved in her likeness. And this statue? Yeah, it's a lot. Gracie's statue sits there with her head tilted slightly downward, eyes sad, posture perfect. People swear her eyes follow them. Others claim she cries. Some say she appears happy in photos one day and heartbreakingly sad the next. Basically, she's the most emotionally complex 6-year-old you've ever met, even in death. Visitors leave toys at her grave, dolls, bracelets, stuffed animals, and people swear that if you move them, they somehow move back. I don't know how, but Gracie clearly has strong opinions about interior decorating. Then there's the crying woman, a full-on Savannah classic. Late at night, people report hearing sobbing near certain graves. Not wind, not owls, straight-up crying. The kind that makes you freeze and whisper, "Yeah, I'm not equipped for this." Some say it's a grieving mother. Others say it's a widow who never left her husband's side, even after death. Either way, if you hear crying in a cemetery at night, that is not your cue to investigate. That is your cue to leave respectfully and briskly. Now let's talk about the shadow figures. Visitors and security guards have reported seeing dark shapes moving between graves, tall, human-shaped silhouettes that disappear when you look directly at them. And Savannah ghosts don't rush. These shadows take their time. They drift. They linger. Like they're thinking, I could scare you, but I'm going to build tension first. Some people claim they've been touched. Light brushes on the arm, a tap on the shoulder, the unmistakable feeling that someone is standing right behind you when there is absolutely nobody there. Which is my least favorite feeling, personally. And of course there are the voices, whispers, murmurs, footsteps crunching gravel behind you when you turn around and realize you are very much alone. People say they hear their names being called. And Savannah ghosts? They are polite but persistent. Soft voices, calm tones. Just enough to make you second-guess your sanity. Now here's the thing about Bonaventure. It's peaceful. Almost too peaceful. It doesn't feel aggressive or evil. It feels occupied. Like you're visiting a place that is still very much in use. And honestly, the ghosts there seem kind of offended when people act disrespectful. There are stories of cameras malfunctioning, phones draining instantly, people tripping for no reason. Savannah spirits don't scream. They judge. Bonaventure is the kind of place where the dead don't chase you. They watch you. And somehow that's worse. So if you ever visit, be respectful. Don't mock the statues. Don't touch Gracie's things. Don't stay after dark unless you're emotionally prepared. And if you hear crying, whispering, or footsteps behind you, just remember, you were warned, and Bonaventure never really lets anyone visit alone. The Marshall House opened its doors in 1851, back when Savannah was thriving and mustaches were a personality trait. Originally built as a grand hotel for travelers and wealthy folks who wanted comfort and bragging rights, it quickly became one of the fanciest places in town. Guests came for luxury, polite society, and probably zero expectation that their hotel would later double as a medical nightmare. Life was good. Briefly. Then the Civil War showed up and said, yeah, about that hotel. The Marshall House was converted into a Union hospital, which is where things took a hard left into nightmare fuel. Surgeons treated wounded soldiers right there, often without anesthesia, because apparently pain management was a future problem. Amputations were common, hygiene was questionable at best, and the building soaked up more suffering than a daytime soap opera. After the war, the hotel tried to go back to being classy like nothing happened. Very new paint, hoodis, energy. Over the years, it changed hands, fell into disrepair, and eventually shut down. When renovations began in the 1990s, workers uncovered human remains, including amputated arms and legs inside the walls, which is never what you want to find when you're just trying to install drywall. That discovery pretty much confirmed what Savannah locals had been whispering for decades. This place never moved on. Guests today report hearing children laughing, which is already unsettling because children should not be giggling in an empty hallway at 2 a.m. Some believe these are the spirits of kids who stayed there when it later served as a boarding house, while others are like, "I don't care who it is, I'm checking out." People also hear doors opening and closing on their own. Classic ghost behavior, because spirits apparently love messing with hinges. One of the most famous experiences is guests waking up to the smell of rotting flesh. Yes, really. It's often linked to the building's hospital past, and it tends to show up uninvited like an unwanted memory. Even better, guests report waking up to find bloody handprints on mirrors. No cuts, no injuries, just surprise horror decor. Housekeeping absolutely hates that shift. Then there's the apparitions. People see full-body figures of soldiers, nurses, and shadowy figures standing in doorways, just watching. Not threatening, just silently judging, which somehow feels worse. Some guests feel hands tugging at their blankets or pressure on their chest while sleeping. Sleep paralysis? Maybe. Ghosts with zero respect for personal space? Also very possible. Staff members aren't immune either. Employees report hearing their names called when no one's there, seeing reflections move when they don't, and feeling sudden cold spots that follow them down the halls. Elevators have minds of their own, lights flicker, and objects relocate themselves like the ghosts are redecorating, which is rude because they're not paying rent. Today, the Marshall House proudly embraces its haunted reputation, because if your walls once held amputated limbs, you might as well lean in. It's considered one of the most haunted hotels in Savannah, and guests still willingly book rooms knowing full well they might get an extra invisible roommate. You check in for the charm, the history, and maybe to see if the mirror says hello back. Savannah was barely born when the story of the pirate's house started stretching its legs. Back in 1733, General James Oglethorpe set up the trustees' garden right behind where the pirate's house now stands, trying to see what crops might survive Georgia's heat and humidity without giving up and moving back to England. Not long after, a small building known today as the Herb House popped up around 1734, originally meant to house the garden's caretaker. Nobody knew it then, but this little structure would eventually become one of the oldest surviving buildings in the state, and a future hotspot for seafood, rum, and ghostly side-eye. By the mid-17th century, Savannah was a full-blown port town, and where sailors go, trouble politely follows. Around 1753, the building became an inn and tavern, welcoming sailors who had been at sea way too long and pirates who were allergic to authority. This was the kind of place where deals were made over drinks, lies were told for sport, and nobody asked too many questions as long as the rum kept flowing. If walls could talk, these ones would need subtitles and a parental advisory. Over time, more rooms and buildings were added, especially toward the late 1700s and early 1800s, turning the spot into the maze-like structure it is today. That's why the pirate's house feels like a historical funhouse. Every room looks older than your grandma's cast iron skillet, and the floors creak like they're judging you for wearing modern shoes. The place didn't just age, it collected centuries like souvenirs. One of the most infamous legends tied to the pirate's house involves underground tunnels. According to local lore, these tunnels ran from the tavern toward the Savannah River and were used to kidnap drunk sailors. The process was simple. Get them tipsy, knock them out, drag them through a tunnel, and boom. By morning, they're on a ship headed who knows where, wondering why their head hurts and why they suddenly have a job on the ocean. HR policies were different back then. With that much shady business happening, it's no surprise people think some of the former guests never really checked out. Staff and visitors over the years have reported hearing heavy footsteps when nobody's around, doors opening on their own, and strange noises echoing through the older rooms. It's the kind of place where you turn around expecting to see someone, and instead, you get goosebumps and regret. Some people swear they've seen shadowy figures moving through the hallways or lingering near the herb house, especially at night. Others talk about sudden cold spots, that uneasy feeling of being watched, or the sense that someone just walked past you even though the room is empty. Basically, it's the full haunted house sampler platter, served with hush puppies. Then there's the legend of Captain Flint, the infamous pirate from Treasure Island, who supposedly died in Savannah and haunts the pirate's house. Is he fictional? Yes. Does that stop anyone? Absolutely not. Savannah loves a good ghost story, especially one involving pirates, buried treasure, and dramatic deaths. If Captain Flint did haunt the place, he'd fit right in. Today, the pirate's house is still serving food, drinks, and history, along with the occasional unexplained noise just to keep things spicy. Whether you believe the ghost stories or not, there's no denying the place has energy, attitude, and a past that refuses to stay quiet. Come for the history, stay for the atmosphere, and maybe don't follow any strange footsteps toward the basement. The Mercer Williams house sits on Monterey Square like it knows every secret Savannah ever whispered and kept them all out of spite. It was originally designed in the late 1850s for General Hugh Mercer, meant to be this grand symbol of Southern elegance. But the Civil War showed up like an uninvited guest and completely derailed the plans. Construction stalled, money disappeared, and in the ultimate historical side-eye, no one named Mercer ever actually lived there. The house kept the name anyway, because Savannah loves irony almost as much as it loves ghosts. When it was finally completed after the war, the house passed through different owners, quietly aging, collecting creaks, stairs, and that heavy feeling old buildings get when they've seen too much. Everything changed in 1969 when Jim Williams, an antiques dealer with serious taste and even more serious confidence, bought the home. He restored it into a masterpiece, ornate details, dramatic staircases, and enough antiques to make you afraid to sit down wrong. The house went from pretty old mansion to this place definitely has opinions. Then came the night that cemented the house's legend. In the early hours of May 2nd, 1981, Danny Hansford was shot and killed inside the Mercer Williams house. What followed was years of trials, gossip, and courtroom drama that turned Savannah into a real-life soap opera. Jim Williams claimed self-defense and, after 4 trials, was acquitted. From that moment on, the house wasn't just historic. It was infamous, the kind of place that feels like it remembers everything. And when you mix beauty, tragedy, and unresolved emotions, Savannah folklore doesn't even ask permission. It moves right in. Visitors and staff have long reported strange sensations inside the house, sudden cold spots, that tight feeling in your chest like someone just walked through you instead of past you. Rooms where the air feels heavier, like the house itself is leaning in to listen. Some people swear they've heard footsteps echoing when no one else is there, especially near the staircases. Slow, deliberate steps, like someone taking their time because they know you're not going anywhere. Others report faint voices, murmurs you can't quite make out, which is honestly worse than a full sentence because now your brain gets involved and that's never helpful. Shadow figures are another favorite story. Quick movements caught in the corner of your eye that disappear the second you look straight at them. Not dramatic, floating sheet ghosts. More like, was that a person or am I about to lie to myself for peace? Several people have described the feeling of being watched, not in a scary, jump scare way, but in a calm, confident way. Like the watcher has owned the house longer than you've owned your fear. Of course, some folks say it's just an old house doing old house things. Wood expanding, pipes knocking, imagination running wild in a city that treats ghost stories like a second language. But Savannah locals will tell you this. Places don't earn reputations like this for no reason. Stories survive because something about them rings true, especially when everyone swears they felt it before they heard it. So if you ever find yourself on Monterey Square as the sun starts to dip and the shadows stretch a little too long, don't be surprised if the Mercer Williams house feels like it's watching you back. Not angry, not violent, just aware. And in Savannah, that's usually the first sign that the past isn't done with you yet. Long before Savannah had ghost tours, open container laws, or people dramatically whispering, "This city has a vibe," the Candler Oak was already standing there, rooted, massive, and absolutely unbothered. This ancient live oak is believed to be several hundred years old, which means it's older than most of Savannah's grudges, and has watched the city grow from dirt roads and carriages into a full-blown haunted personality. Draped in Spanish moss like it's wearing a haunted lace shawl, the tree looks like it knows secrets. And it does. The oak gets its name from the Candler family, one of Savannah's early prominent families, back when land ownership meant power and everyone with money had a last name that sounded important. The tree would have witnessed horse-drawn carriages, whispered deals, polite southern smiles, and all the mess happening just beneath the surface, standing there silently like a wooden therapist who never forgets. But things get darker when you learn the land around the Candler Oak is tied to public punishments and executions, because back then if someone messed up, the solution was apparently to do it outside in front of everyone. Locals believe the tree stood near gallows or execution grounds, meaning it didn't just provide shade, it provided front-row seating to fear, regret, and last moments that had nowhere to go. Over time, people say the oak absorbed all that emotional chaos like a haunted sponge, storing pain, anger, and unfinished business deep inside its massive trunk, which might explain why the air around it feels heavier than Savannah humidity, and that's saying something. Visitors report sudden dizziness, sadness, and the overwhelming urge to leave, like their soul quietly whispered, "Yeah, this ain't it." Others swear they hear faint voices, murmurs that sound like prayers cut short, or conversations that never got to end. And at night, some say the temperature drops around the tree like the spirits decided to turn the AC on. Shadowy figures have reportedly been seen near its base after dark, never fully forming, just shapes that don't belong, while the Spanish moss sometimes moves with no wind at all, which is unsettling because Spanish moss already looks like it's plotting something. What really gets people talking is how the Candler Oak seems to react to those who linger too long, making some feel watched, emotionally overwhelmed, or hit with a sudden wave of feelings that aren't theirs. Fear, grief, guilt, or the intense need to apologize to someone from 200 years ago. Today, the tree still stands quietly, surviving centuries of human nonsense while being deeply, unapologetically haunted as tourists snap photos, ghost hunters whip out equipment, and locals casually walk past thinking, "Yeah, don't stand there too long." Because in Savannah, even the trees have ghosts, and this one has trauma, receipts, and absolutely no interest in your peace of mind. Savannah loves confusing people, so first thing to know, Taylor Square wasn't always called that. For most of its life, it was Calhoun Square, named after John C. Calhoun. Folks eventually realized maybe naming a square after a pro-slavery politician wasn't the vibe anymore, so in 2022, the city renamed it for Susie King Taylor, a local Savannah hero. She was a formerly enslaved woman who became a Civil War nurse and teacher. Honestly, she deserves her own Marvel movie. This square sits between Gordon and Taylor Streets and was laid out in 1851. Back then, Savannah squares were basically the HOA of the city, places to meet, gossip, and judge people's horse parking. Wealthy families lived in the fancy homes that surround it. Think Johnny cakes and embroidered napkins, real bougie vibes. But here's where things get spicy. Historians discovered that Taylor Square sits right on top of what used to be a burial ground for African Americans, including enslaved people. And as Savannah likes to do, most of the bodies were left right where they lay when development pushed through. I swear Savannah builds houses like, there's graves here, shrugs, put a staircase. Some locals claim when the square was landscaped, workers found bones, lots of bones, and instead of quietly reinterring them like respectful humans, somebody apparently said, we'll just scoot them to the side. Hauntings unlocked. Visitors say that at night the air gets heavy and you can hear voices whispering from the moss-covered trees. One woman swears she heard someone humming an old spiritual near the playground after midnight. She left so fast she probably teleported. Residents nearby have woken up to see full-body apparitions walking through their living rooms. Like, ghost, I lived here first. Homeowner, bet. You gotta respect a ghost with squatter's rights. Now hold on to your sweet tea, because here's where the juicy legend fits in. Folks around Savannah whisper about a federal judge's son whose story didn't end with a gavel but with a noose, right near this square. According to old ghost tour lore, his name was Wesley Espy, and the official report at the time claimed he died after falling from a tall porch at his family home near the square. But the unofficial version, the kind passed down like a spooky bedtime tale, says something much more dramatic. Wesley was secretly involved with a bootlegger's daughter, a romance that set off a feud between two of Savannah's most powerful families. Picture this: Prohibition era, pearl-clad daddy judges, moonshine stills hidden behind magnolia bushes, and two youngsters madly in love. The judge, furious and terrified of scandal, allegedly had Wesley dragged to Taylor Square one night and hanged him there, because nothing says problem solved like medieval justice at midnight. Locals would later swear they could hear a creaking rope and faint sobs when the live oaks rustled in the wind. Wesley's ghost has become part of local lore, haunting the square on misty evenings with eyewitnesses claiming to see a forlorn figure lingering among the shadows. Couple Wesley's legend with other eerie tales, unmarked graves, whispered voices under the oak trees, and sightings of shadow figures moving between benches. And Taylor Square becomes a favorite stop for ghost tours and nighttime daredevils. Tour guides love bringing groups here because activity is high. Shadow figures cross the square, and one man on TripAdvisor said he caught a ghost child peeking from behind a lamppost. Ghost kids are the worst. Why can't their bedtime be eternal? The creepiest legend is about a woman dressed in Civil War-era clothing who appears only when someone mentions slavery or injustice. She stares silently, then fades away, probably thinking, about time y'all changed that street name. So today, Taylor Square is beautiful and peaceful by daylight, but once darkness falls, the past clocks back in. You can stroll through if you want, Just don't look behind you when the Spanish moss moves with no wind. If someone whispers your name, walk faster. And if you see footsteps with no feet, mind your business and keep going. Savannah ghosts don't play. If you wander through quiet oak-lined Washington Square in Savannah and spot a prim gray house that looks like it minds its manners but secretly throws shade, that's the Hampton Lillibridge House. Built in the late 1790s by a Rhode Island sea captain named Hampton Lillibridge, it was one of the few clapboard homes that survived Savannah fires, wars, and humidity. Picture him saying, "I'm done with the sea, let me build a house somewhere moist." He sets up shop, starts a family, and then promptly dies of yellow fever in 1801. Folks back then really collected tragic endings like Pokemon cards. After Lillibridge's widow sold the property, the house began its Airbnb before Airbnb era. It was a boarding house full of travelers and sailors, aka a lot of folks with loud boots and secrets. Imagine thin walls, shared bowls of grits, and that one sailor who snores like a chainsaw. All kinds of human mess seeped into those floorboards. Ironically, that might help explain the many ghostly footsteps people would later report. Over the next century and a half, the house changed hands repeatedly like a cursed fidget spinner. Rumors swirled. Families stayed briefly. Boarders packed up in the middle of the night. Some folks whispered about mysterious deaths connected to the property. The house eventually sat empty, windows shuttered, doors locked. But neighbors swore it still made noise, sometimes loud enough to drown out crickets. Jump forward to the 1960s, when antiques dealer and restoration buff Jim Williams, the future protagonist of Savannah's most dramatic murder trial, bought the house and wanted to move it to a new lot. That's when the hauntings kicked up like someone pressed unmute on the ghost channel. When the crew moved the building, a nearby house collapsed into a pit and killed several workers. Locals nodded like, "Yep, that tracks." Savannah ghosts do not appreciate construction. Once renovations began, the workers started quitting faster than employees at a haunted Walmart. Tools vanished, doors slammed when no one touched them. Some saw a man in black formal clothes wandering the halls like he still lived there. Others swore they heard phantom parties, music and voices drifting through empty rooms. One worker was reportedly grabbed and nearly dragged into an open chimney shaft, like the house tried to eat him. When he suggested the place needed an exorcism, something screamed. A blood-curdling, "Yes, finally someone said it," scream. Eventually, a bishop from the Episcopal Diocese came in and performed a full exorcism. Imagine a stern churchman in full vestments sprinkling holy water while contractors peek around corners like Scooby-Doo characters. The ritual lasted about 45 minutes and seemed to calm things down for about a week. Then the ghosts came back like, "Round 2, baby." The legends that grew out of those renovations are deliciously dramatic. A hostile spirit that shoves people, the ghost in the bow tie who strolls around judging everyone, loud disembodied screams, and voices when no one's home. Paranormal groups started calling it Savannah's most haunted house, partly because it had an official exorcism on record, which is basically haunting bragging rights. Today, the Hampton Lillibridge house has been restored into a private residence. The current owners insist they live a perfectly normal, ghost-free life and really wish strangers would stop asking if their silverware flies across the room at midnight. Maybe the spirits finally moved on. Maybe they learned manners. Or maybe they're sitting upstairs right now, sipping ghostly tea, happy that someone is still telling their messy business centuries later. Savannah loves to pretend she's all sweet tea and Spanish moss, but the old pink house knows the real gossip. You can't miss it. sitting pretty on Abercorn Street like a southern belle dressed for a cotillion in a shade of bubblegum blush. But that pastel paint job has been through some things. The story starts in 1771, when a wealthy fella named James Habersham Jr. built what he thought would be a classy family mansion. He didn't ask for ghosts, just a big old house where he could drink Madeira wine in peace. The exterior brick kept bleeding through the plaster, giving the house a pink hue. Folks got tired of repainting and just said, you know what? Fine. Pink. Boom. Branding done. Habersham didn't get to enjoy his Barbie dream house for long. He died under mysterious circumstances. Some say he took his own life. Others whispered darker political plots revolving around the Revolutionary War and his ties to Britain. Either way, he didn't exactly cross over peacefully. And when Savannah ghosts don't cross over peacefully, they start doing after-hours maintenance. By the time the Civil War rolled through, the Pink House was used for meetings, secret gatherings, maybe even a ghostly HOA meeting or two. Then it was a bank. Yes, a bank. Because nothing says financial stability like depositing your paycheck in a haunted mansion. Legend says thieves would break in and hear footsteps behind them, only to turn around and find no one there. Some robbers reportedly fled empty-handed because, well, phantom auditors. When the building finally became a restaurant, that's when diners started noticing weird stuff. Forks move, candles light themselves, servers swear wine glasses refill on their own. Honestly, that might not be a haunting. That might be great customer service. One woman claimed her chair was pulled out for her by invisible hands, and she still left a 15% tip. Rude. They say Habersham's ghost hangs out near the tavern. He's described as tall, gentlemanly, well-dressed, like he's still supervising dinner service. Some guests claim he sits with them, smiles politely, and vanishes when the appetizers arrive. Popular theory, even dead men don't like cold crab cakes. But he's not the only spirit. A woman in mourning black has been seen floating through the dining rooms, weeping softly. Folks assume she's grieving lost love, but maybe she just saw those dinner prices. Others report a ghostly child tugging on sleeves or sneaking into private dining rooms to giggle. Ghost kids always have way too much energy. Where are their bedtime hauntings? Today, the Old Pink House is one of Savannah's most famous haunted restaurants. The wait list is long, the history is rich, and the spirits, both liquid and paranormal, flow freely. Tour guides love to point out that the building survived war, fire, scandal, and centuries of dramatic Southern storytelling. And now it's the only place where you can have shrimp and grits while a ghost straightens your silverware. Welcome to Savannah, where dinner comes with sweet tea, biscuits, and a side of hauntings. Let me tell you a little story about Savannah's infamous underground hallway of Nope. The old Candler Hospital, built back in 1804, was Savannah's first hospital and one of the oldest in the United States. It handled everything: childbirth, yellow fever, surgeries done with rum breath, all of it. And during Savannah's yellow fever epidemics, hundreds of bodies piled up in that hospital faster than the doctors could say, "Next patient." They needed a discreet way to move the dead so the living wouldn't panic, so they built a tunnel straight from the hospital to Forsyth Park. Yep, that gorgeous park where people picnic today. Dead people got wheeled under it like DoorDash orders. The tunnel was mainly used to transport bodies to the morgue and onward to mass graves. Imagine some poor 1800s intern getting the night shift. Hey, grab a lantern, take these bodies down the secret death hallway. Try not to trip. No wonder that hall became haunted. I'd haunt it too if my only post-mortem Uber ride was a shaky wooden gurney. For years, staff, students, and trespassers have claimed that when you walk into the tunnel, the temperature drops instantly. Not like a little chill. You know, when somebody opens the fridge and just stands there thinking? Worse. And echoing footsteps bounce off the stone walls even when you're standing still, like somebody behind you is keeping pace. But when you turn around, nothing. Just you and your questionable decisions. There's one famous ghost story about the man in white. Supposedly, he was a doctor during the yellow fever outbreak who couldn't save his patients and died from exhaustion. People see a tall figure in outdated medical clothes lingering at the far end of the tunnel. He doesn't talk, doesn't move, just watches. Look, I'm telling you right now, if I saw that, I'm sprinting so fast my Fitbit would think I did a marathon. Another legend says the tunnel still carries the smell of antiseptic mixed with something metallic, probably from when bodies were stored there before burial. Visitors swear they hear metal wheels squeaking on the floor and doors slamming shut, even though the hospital stopped using the space long ago. If that's not paranormal activity, then Savannah has the scariest HVAC system in America. Locals also whisper about the ghost parade. Around 3 a.m., shadows glide down the tunnel, lined up like soldiers marching single file. Some say they're yellow fever victims being transported to the cemetery. Imagine being a security guard and seeing a bunch of shadowy forms politely waiting in line like they're checking into a hotel. Nope. Absolutely not. These days, the tunnel is sealed, but that doesn't stop people from breaking in or tick-tocking themselves crying in the corner. The hospital grounds are still rumored to be cursed, and Forsyth Park's southern end sits right over where bodies were buried. So if you've ever walked your dog there and he started barking at absolutely nothing, congrats, your dog saw a ghost and didn't charge extra for the tour. So yeah, the old Candler Hospital morgue tunnel is creepy, historic, and probably haunted by hundreds of Savannah's restless souls. Next time you're in Forsyth Park, take a stroll and remember, under those pretty trees and fountains was once Savannah's express lane to the afterlife. If you hear footsteps behind you, walk faster. If you stroll through Taylor Square at night, the gentle, haunted heartbeat of Savannah, and look across to that salmon-colored mansion with the iron balcony doing too much. That's 432 Abercorn Street. You can spot it because every ghost tour guide suddenly drops their voice and goes, "Now this one," like it's the Beyoncé of haunted houses. The house went up right after the Civil War, built for a wealthy man named Benjamin Wilson. Back then it was one of the most expensive homes in Savannah, still dripping money today, but for a long time it sat empty and crumbling, which is basically a Craigslist invite for ghosts. In Savannah, when a house sits empty, the spirits go, "Roommates?" Legend number 1 is the one everybody knows. The story goes General Wilson had a little girl who loved playing with the kids across the street at the historic Massey School. He didn't approve, so when she disobeyed, he tied her to a chair facing the window to watch the other kids play. Savannah heat plus no AC equals tragedy. That's why people say at dusk, you can see a child in the upstairs window, staring like she's grounded for eternity. Tourists swear she shows up in photos, sometimes clearer than your cousin's iPhone concert pictures. Then there's the curse rumor. Supposedly, 432 Abercorn sits on land once used as an unmarked burial ground for enslaved people. Savannah has a long habit of building over its dead without a second thought. So whether this exact patch was a cemetery or not, that energy sticks to the block like humidity to your hair. Folks claim shadow figures cross the yard at night, moving like they've got someplace to be, and it's not with the living. Ghost story number 2, the triple murder. A family supposedly rented the home in the 1950s. Parents go out for dinner, come back to find 3 daughters dead in their beds, arranged in some strange pattern. The 4th child lived, traumatized forever. No record of this tragedy exists at City Hall, but the story sticks like gum on a shoe because Savannah loves her drama. Through the decades, paranormal investigators and daredevil teens slid into that house while it sat empty. They tell stories of freezing cold rooms in the middle of summer, sudden scratches on their backs, or batteries draining instantly. One guy said his flashlight flickered in Morse code saying, "Get out." Was it a ghost or Dollar Tree batteries? We'll never know. Eventually, someone bought the place, restored it, and now it's a gorgeous private home again. Fancy fountain, lush courtyard, restored balconies, the works. But the legends didn't move out with the termites. People still gather outside hoping to catch a glimpse of that child in the window. So today, 432 Abercorn lives a double life. By daylight, it's Pinterest-perfect southern elegance. After dark, it becomes Savannah's messy rumor mill of horrors, where ghost tours whisper, cameras malfunction, and every so often someone snaps a photo that makes everybody zoom in and say, "Hold up, who is that standing in the window?" The Sorrelweed House sits right on Madison Square, looking all elegant like it's just minding its business. Completed around 1840 for a wealthy merchant named Francis Sorrel, this mansion was the spot where Savannah's elite sipped expensive tea and judged each other quietly. Sorrel made his money through shipping, which sounds polite, but let's be real. Ships in that era weren't just carrying decorative pillows. The home later passed to the Weed family. Yes, Weed. No, not that kind. And between the two names, the house sounds like a dispensary that also sells herbal tea. As the wealth flowed, so did the drama. Francis Sorrel was married to a woman named Lucinda, but rumor has it he was also getting a little too comfortable with Molly, one of the enslaved women who lived on the property. When Lucinda allegedly found out about the affair, she could not handle the betrayal. According to Savannah legend, she threw herself from the balcony in despair. Some say her grief never left the house. Not long after Lucinda's death, Molly herself died under mysterious circumstances in the carriage house. Folks whisper it was suicide. Others say Lucinda came back for vengeance. Either way, the stage was set for centuries' worth of paranormal arguments. You've got betrayal, heartbreak, and two spirits who probably still deserve apologies nobody's said yet. Fast forward to modern times. Tour guides at the Sorrelweed House claim visitors hear footsteps pacing, skirts swishing, and doors slamming. Employees swear they've seen figures in period clothing appear in mirrors, even when the tours are closed. I'd personally leave immediately if a ghost photobombed me while I was adjusting my edges. One of the most famous reports is the smell of perfume suddenly filling a room. Some say it's Lucinda passing through, trying to remind everyone she was that girl. Others have reported hearing crying or gasping in the servant quarters. More dramatic guests swear something tried to push them down the stairs. Imagine getting shoved by a ghost, disrespectful and unsanitary. Down in the basement, aka the spot where horror movies begin, people have heard whispers or felt cold hands brush by them. Paranormal investigators have caught strange EVPs, voices saying, "Get out," "Stop," and my personal favorite, "Leave him alone." That could be Molly reminding everyone the gossip ain't over. There are videos of shadows crawling along the walls, sudden light anomalies, and guests fainting during tours. But if you ask the employees, they'll just shrug like, "Yeah, ghosts live here. Anyway, tickets start at $25. Savannah really said, "Ghosts are good for business." And that, my friend, is why the Sorrelweed House was last on our list. Because when the love triangle drama follows you into the afterlife, and they still haunting each other after 180 years? Yeah, nah, that's messy. If I'm touring Savannah's haunted homes, I'm not trying to get dragged into ghost beef left over from the 1800s. Keep that energy in the carriage house. I'm good. Thank you for joining me as we explored some of Savannah's most haunted locations. Whether you believe in spirits or think the stories are just echoes of the past, these places hold real history, real loss, and memories that linger long after the people are gone. Savannah is beautiful, but beneath the moss-covered trees and cobblestone paths is a city built on tragedy, war, disease, and secrets buried deep in the soil. The ghost stories remind us that every corner holds a life once lived. If this episode moved you, taught you something new, or made you curious about Savannah's darker past, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you've had your own experience in any of these places, tell your story in the comments. Your voice becomes part of this history too. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, some doors in Savannah were closed for a reason.